It often begins with something small, an offer to help, an unexpected compliment, a favor given freely without any apparent strings. You're left momentarily stunned, flattered even, by the warmth. It feels like humanity at its best. But that's precisely where the illusion begins. The act, simple on the surface, begins burrowing into the psyche. The kind gesture is no longer just a kind gesture. It transforms into a quiet presence, a soft but persistent voice whispering that you now owe something, though you cannot name exactly what. That is the subtle genius of calculated kindness. It disguises itself as virtue, but it is more often an instrument of control, not through direct domination or violence, that would be too crude, too obvious, but through the psychological dissonance it creates. When a person is cruel, you know how to respond. You defend yourself, you push back, you flee. But when someone wraps their will in generosity, it confuses the moral compass. You hesitate, you analyze. You ask yourself, asterisk, what do they want from me? Asterisk, and then, when they say they want nothing, you are left defenseless against their influence. The terrifying part is that they may, in fact, believe themselves to be good. That is what makes this so difficult to seek. Calculated kindness does not always wear a malicious grin. Sometimes it wears the face of a helper, a friend, even a savior. Yet behind it all is a mind that measures, that evaluates, that ensures every act of goodness is a step in a longer game. To the unsuspecting, kindness feels like the end of a transaction. But to the Machiavellian mind, it is only the opening move. We are taught to seek kindness. We associate it with purity, with moral elevation. But this blind reverence is precisely what makes us susceptible. When someone is too kind too soon, too generous too freely, we are flattered, not wary. We surrender judgment in exchange for comfort. And in doing so, we enter a web that is not built of threats, but of gift, each one reinforcing the silent power dynamic, each one shifting the weight subtly in their favor. In bureaucracies, in relationships, in power structures, the most successful manipulators are rarely the loudest. They are the ones who disarm you with warmth, who speak softly but carry an invisible contract in every kind word. You find yourself saying asterisk yes asterisk before you've asked asterisk why asterisk. You become complicit in your own compromise, believing it was your choice. And the cost, your autonomy, your clear-eyed discernment, your ability to say asterisk no asterisk without guilt. Because how do you refuse someone who has only ever been kind? The trap is not that you are forced to obey, it is that you feel you should. This is the quiet violence of strategic kindness. It demands nothing, yet takes everything. So the next time someone extends an unearned kindness, don't rush to gratitude. Pause, ask why. In a world where power no longer wears a crown, but a smile, survival depends not on resisting cruelty, but recognizing when kindness has teeth. Gratitude is supposed to be beautiful, noble even. It's praised in stories and scripture alike, a virtue that transcends pride and draws people closer. But beneath that praise lies a more troubling truth, one that most refuse to speak aloud. Gratitude can be a burden, a weight you didn't ask to carry, especially when the favor extended to you was never truly unconditional, even if it was presented that way. The moment someone helps you, something shifts in the unseen architecture between you. There is now a ledger, invisible but active. You feel it settle in the background of your thoughts, like a shadow that wasn't there before. Every interaction is now colored by this invisible debt. You replay conversations, you second, guess your independence. You wonder whether your decisions are truly yours anymore, or if they've been quietly leased to the one who gave you something when you needed it most. And it's not always a grand gesture. Often it's something small, a modest offering of assistance during a vulnerable moment. But vulnerability magnifies even the smallest act. When you're down, even a hand on your shoulder can feel like a rescue. And when that rescue comes with no stated expectation, it feels even more overwhelming. You try to rationalize it. Asterisk, they're just good. They wanted nothing in return. Asterisk, but the mind doesn't rest there. The debt forms anyway, not from what was said, but from what was asterisk felt asterisk. Because once someone pulls you from the water, how do you tell them you now want to swim alone? This is the paradox of the burdened heart. You are grateful, yes, but that gratitude is no longer soft. It hardens into obligation, into anxiety, into a kind of emotional imprisonment where your freedom feels like betrayal. You begin to mold yourself around their kindness, slowly, quietly, not out of fear, but out of loyalty. And that, perhaps, is the most sophisticated form of control. There are no threats, no chains, just an ever-present pressure to remain loyal, to repay, to never forget. The truly skilled manipulators know this. They rely on it. They create dependency not by taking from you, but by giving just enough to ensure you can't walk away clean. They don't dominate. They entangle. You wake up one day and realize you no longer act from your own center. Your choices orbit around their generosity like satellites pulled into a gravity you didn't choose. And if you ever push back, if you ever try to reclaim distance, you'll be met not with rage, but with disappointment. A soft, crushing reminder of everything they did for you. Suddenly, you're the ungrateful one, the sinner, the defector. That's the genius of the trap. It punishes you through your own conscience. You become the jailer and the jailed, bound by your own sense of honor. There's no easy escape from this kind of debt. But perhaps the first step is to question the culture that glorifies gratitude without nuance. Not all kindness is clean, and not all debts are fair. Sometimes, the most radical act of self-preservation is to recognize when thank you has become a shackle, because true freedom isn't just the absence of force, it's the absence of silent obligations. There is something profoundly unsettling about softness when it comes from someone who holds power. A whisper carries further than a shout when it falls into a silent room. A gentle gesture can feel more penetrating than a blow when it arrives unexpectedly. People are conditioned to brace against harshness, to fortify themselves when they anticipate resistance or aggression. But no one is prepared to be overpowered by tenderness. That's where the strategy lies, in disarming, not through fear, but through comfort. We mistake softness for harmlessness. A quiet voice, a warm smile, an affectionate phrase. These feel like the language of safety. And so we lower our guard. But in reality, the soft touch can be the most effective form of influence because it meets no resistance. It slides past the mind's defenses, weaving its way into the emotional fabric, where it begins to shape the person from the inside out. There is no need to issue commands when you can condition someone's response by making them feel seen, valued, understood. And those who know how to wield this gentle pressure never need to raise their voice to dominate a room. What's most unsettling is how this power remains invisible. When someone leads with strength, you know what you're dealing with. You know the rules. But when the power dynamic is cloaked in affection and empathy, it becomes difficult to identify, let alone confront. You want to believe that what you're experiencing is sincerity. You want to think that kindness can be pure. So you convince yourself that the sway they hold over you is mutual, voluntary, even deserved. But over time, that softness begins to shape your decisions. You adjust your words to maintain their approval. You calibrate your behavior to preserve their affection. You begin to sense where their boundaries lie, not because they told you, but because you're afraid of disrupting the gentle atmosphere they've cultivated. And now, without even noticing, you've given up your autonomy, not through force, but through accommodation. This is the seduction of soft power. It never has to assert itself. Its strength lies in remaining undetected, in appearing passive when it is anything but. It is the smile that lingers just long enough to alter your mood, the silence that draws your confession, the nod that validates your most vulnerable truth. And once you've received that validation, you're no longer free. You want more of it. You'll behave to keep receiving it. You will yield without knowing you've yielded. The tragedy is not that people fall under such influence. It's that they often welcome it, because being gently controlled feels better than being harshly ignored. It's a subtle seduction, not just of the will, but of the self-image. You feel chosen, understood, appreciated, and it's in that feeling, that illusion of emotional safety, that your choices begin to slowly orbit theirs. So if a voice speaks softly, don't assume it carries no weight. And if a hand rests gently on your shoulder, don't forget it still has the power to steer you. In a world obsessed with volume and spectacle, the most dangerous influence may be the one that whispers. Every favor is written down somewhere, even if no one speaks of it. That's the nature of the invisible ledger. It doesn't require ink or even intention. It exists in the background of human interaction, etched into the subtle mechanics of memory and obligation. You do not always see it being kept, but you feel it, a look, a pause, a reminder so slight you question whether it was a reminder at all. But the message is clear. Asterisk, I helped you. You remember, don't you? Asterisk, this is where the cruelty of calculated kindness intensifies, not in the act itself, but in the quiet accumulation. Each gesture, each sacrifice, no matter how small, is added to the balance sheet. Over time, the weight builds, not all at once, but slowly, patiently. And suddenly, you find yourself living under its pressure. You begin to move carefully around the one who gave to you, not because they've asked anything of you, but because the ledger lives inside you now. It has taken up residence in your conscience. What makes this so difficult to resist is that it rarely comes from a place of overt manipulation. In fact, the person keeping the ledger may appear indifferent to repayment. They may insist they expect nothing in return, but still there is something in their tone, in the precision of their silence, that makes you hesitate. You sense that they remember every detail, even as they pretend not to. And now you remember too, more clearly than you'd like. You begin to alter your behavior, not out of fear, but out of a sense of indebtedness. You offer your time more freely, you second. Guess your decisions if they might cause even slight inconvenience. You allow small intrusions, subtle impositions, because you think asterisk after all. They were there when I needed them asterisk. The ledger whispers constantly, reminding you to be grateful, to be loyal, to comply. What's most disturbing is that you begin to feel morally obligated to betray yourself. Your silence becomes a form of repayment. Your discomfort becomes a gesture of loyalty. And worst of all, you convince yourself that this is what it means to be good. To never forget what you were given, and to always make room for it, no matter how tight your life becomes. The truly skilled never ask for direct repayment. They don't need to. They let the ledger speak for them. They let your memory carry the weight, and they let your conscience police your actions. This is not control in the traditional sense. It's something far more enduring. It's not a demand, it's a distortion. You give not because you're asked, but because you feel you must. And that feeling, once rooted, becomes very hard to unlearn. We often think freedom is the ability to say no. But real freedom, the kind worth pursuing, is the ability to say no to someone who once said yes to you, because the ledger only has power over those who believe they still owe something, and maybe, just maybe, the most honest way to honor a favor is to refuse to become its prisoner. There's a particular kind of confusion that arises when someone chooses kindness where cruelty was expected. It halts the rhythm of your thoughts. You're prepared for conflict, for coldness, for some kind of transactional exchange, and instead you're met with warmth. You should feel relief, and yet you don't. Something feels off. The gesture of compassion arrives like a misplaced line in a play, throwing the entire script into question. Was this genuine? Was this strategy? You can't tell, and in that uncertainty you become vulnerable. When cruelty arrives, it at least obeys the rules, it declares itself. You recognize it, you prepare for it, you defend against it. But when cruelty wraps itself in concern, when it smiles instead of snarls, you don't know where to look. You feel gratitude for the very person you instinctively don't trust. You begin to thank the hand you were once certain might strike you. This reversal is disorienting, and in that disorientation, control is established. The most efficient way to destabilize someone is not through aggression, it's through confusion. And calculated kindness, when deployed at the moment cruelty seems most appropriate, creates just that. It sabotages your expectations. It rewrites the emotional logic of the moment. It says, asterisk, I could have punished you, but I didn't. Asterisk, what is left unspoken is more chilling than any threat, because now you live in the aftermath, trying to make sense of an interaction that doesn't quite fit. Your mind searches for patterns, for clarity, and in that mental scramble, your defenses falter. What follows is not peace, but dependence. You begin to crave their kindness, if only to feel steady again. You try to avoid triggering their displeasure, even though it was never openly displayed. You imagine the punishment you were spared, and you feel bound to the person who spared you. And so kindness becomes a form of leverage, an unspoken comparison point that says, asterisk, remember what I could have done. Remember how merciful I was. Asterisk, this is cruelty in its most sophisticated form. It leaves no bruises. It doesn't even raise its voice. It simply offers you comfort at the precise moment you expected pain, and in doing so, it binds you more effectively than fear ever could, because fear repels, but this manipulative mercy, it draws you closer. And the more you receive it, the more you abandon your instincts. You stop questioning motives. You begin to doubt your intuition. You erase red flags because kindness has painted over them in soft tones. You convince yourself it must be good because it feels so different from harm. But the most dangerous influence isn't the one that looks like a monster. It's the one that looks like grace. We must learn to see this for what it is, the weaponization of compassion. A tactic that disarms not through threat, but through the unexpected. So the next time you find yourself breathing easier in the hands of someone you once feared, pause, look again, because not all mercy is mercy. Sometimes it's just a quieter kind of domination. There is a certain figure that moves through the world unnoticed, not because they are invisible, but because they are too agreeable, too composed, too precise in their displays of virtue. Their presence doesn't intimidate, it soothes. Their voice never rises, but it cuts through. They offer advice that feels like wisdom, touch lives with carefully timed generosity, and remain just detached enough to avoid suspicion. People call them kind, noble even, but underneath this choreography lies something colder, something engineered. This is not kindness as instinct. This is kindness as architecture. These are not saints. They are strategists. The Machiavellian Saint does not need to control you overtly. They simply ensure that you want their approval, that you need it, that their disapproval, even silently expressed, feels like exile. They craft an identity that appears to operate on higher principles, as though they've transcended common ego, common need. But this is part of the mask. Their kindness is not given freely. It is dispensed with purpose. Each gesture is a thread, and the more you accept, the more tightly woven you become in their narrative. They have mastered restraint. They don't react when provoked. They let you stumble. They let you come to them. And when you do, they welcome you without judgment, but not without memory. Every conversation, every moment of weakness you revealed is catalogued. They don't weaponize it immediately. That would be too obvious. Instead, they let you keep speaking, let you feel safe, let you believe you've finally found someone who sees you fully and accepts you anyway. And they do see you, just not in the way you think. They see your needs, your insecurities, your aspirations, and most importantly, your desire to be understood. That is their leverage. While others seek dominance through confrontation, the Machiavellian Saint conquers through recognition. They make you feel known, and in return, you offer them influence without realizing you've given it. But there comes a moment, often quiet and internal, when you begin to sense the imbalance, when your respect becomes reverence, when your admiration makes you hesitant to question. That is the moment you should worry, not because they will harm you, but because you've already surrendered something essential, your capacity to evaluate them objectively. And if you ever pull away, if you start to see through the veil, they will not chase you, they will not argue, they will simply retreat into the moral high ground they built for themselves, and you will be left wondering if you were the one who failed them. That's the final mastery, the ability to walk away blameless while leaving you tangled in guilt. It's easy to fear villains who wear cruelty openly, but the ones who clothe themselves in kindness are harder to resist, and far harder to escape. They don't conquer cities, they conquer convictions. So when someone's goodness seems too refined, too curated, pause. When their kindness never slips, never falters, never contradicts itself, be wary. Because sometimes the most dangerous manipulator isn't the one who controls your actions. It's the one who rewrites your idea of virtue itself.